The Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl this year, marking their first ever Super Bowl championship. Yes, they've won 3 championships before the NFL merger in 1948, 1949, and 1960. But the Browns have also won championships, and no one seems to care. And in today's NFL, you have to win the Super Bowl to be known around the league. The Eagles have been to 3 Super Bowls. They went in 1980 and lost to the Raiders, they went in the 2004 season and lost to the Patriots, and finally they went in the 2017 season and won their first Super Bowl versus the Patriots. There is a lot to talk about, and I don't want to talk about all the history of the Eagles, but I do want to start off in 1994. Team owner Norman Brayman sold the Eagles on May 6th of 1994 to a group led by Jeffrey Lurie. At that time, this was the record amount for a sports team. The Eagles were sold for $185 million, but it wasn't until 1999 when Andy Reid was hired and he changed Eagles football. In that same year, the Eagles drafted Donovan McNabb. Andy Reid worked for the Packers and was their offensive line coach for a couple of years. Andy worked with the quarterbacks and was an assistant head coach. However, the Eagles were criticized by their hire of Andy, and fans and media members stated how other candidates had more experience, or even were more qualified. I mean, Coach Reid was never an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, and the Eagles did look at Andy's boss to become their head coach, which was Mike Holmgren. Mike decided to take the Seahawks head coaching job instead, but he advised Jeffrey Lurie to hire Andy as their head coach. When Andy was hired, they drafted Donovan McNabb, like I mentioned, but they did start a quarterback that played under Andy in Green Bay. Doug Peterson started the first 9 games of the season for Andy Reid in Philly, and he was a great mentor for Donovan McNabb. In Andy's first season, the Eagles went 5-11 in 1999, but in 2000, they went 11-5 and won a playoff game versus Tampa Bay, but lost to the Giants the next week. The Eagles were about to turn it on, though. Coach Reid took them to 4 straight conference championship games from 2001 through 2004. In 2001, they lost to the Rams 29-24. In 2002, they lost to the Buccaneers 27-10. In 2003, they lost to the Panthers 14-3. But finally, in 2004, they beat the Falcons 27-10 and made the Super Bowl with a matchup versus New England. They lost this game in the final minutes with the score being 24-21. After the Super Bowl season, the 2005 season was very different from most years for the Eagles. Injuries and flux throughout the organization derailed their 2005 campaign, and the Eagles went 6-10 with a year to forget. In 2006, the Eagles started out 4-1, but Donovan McNabb got injured, which hurt their chances to make the playoffs. They still ended up making it and won a playoff game versus the Giants, but lost to the Saints in the divisional round. The 2007 season, the Eagles had Donovan McNabb returning and were considered to be a legit Super Bowl contender. But they just never got the ball rolling and were up and down all year, which resulted in an 8-8 record. In 2008, the Eagles had an interesting year, tying in a game versus the Bengals and making the playoffs as the last team in for the NFC. They went all the way to the conference championship game, but they lost to the Cardinals 32-25. The 2009 season, the Eagles went 11-5, and this was going to be Donovan McNabb's last year on the team. They made the playoffs but lost 34-14 to the Cowboys in the wildcard game, but during the 2010 season, Donovan McNabb was off and playing for the Redskins, and all-time Eagle Brian Westbrook was cut. So the Eagles brought in Michael Vick. Now he split time with Kevin Kolb, and they had an interesting QB battle all year, but they made the playoffs and lost to the Packers in the wildcard game 21-16. The Eagles had high hopes for the 2011 season though. This team was called the Dream Team by their backup quarterback Vince Young. The Eagles brought in a lot of talent, bringing in guys like Jason Babin, Nnamdi Asomugha, and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. At the time, these guys were star NFL players, but they never really got things to work out with all the hype they had. The Eagles finished 8-8 and missed the playoffs. Now they did win their last 4 games and almost made a miracle run at the playoffs. But they missed the playoffs, and the Dream Team was not a dream team at all. Now the 2012 season, the Eagles picked up right where they left off. They started out the year 3-1, but after that they went 1-11 and suffered the worst year since 1998. After the year, Andy Reid was fired and the Eagles decided to look in a new direction. Jeffrey Lurie decided to hire Chip Kelly, who was the head coach at Oregon. Chip ran a fast-paced offense in college, and people were questioning if it would work in the NFL. Nick Foles took over as the starter in his first year because Michael Vick got injured. Now this season was successful for the Eagles. LaShawn McCoy won the NFL rushing title. Nick Foles threw 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. They did a great job drafting as well, taking Lane Johnson and Zach Ertz. These guys were going to play big roles in the future for the Eagles. The Eagles finished the year 10-6, but they lost in the wild card to the Saints. But after the year, Chip Kelly's message became hostile in the locker room. The Eagles released Deshaun Jackson, which set off a flame that Chip Kelly was not going to mess around, and that you could be next if you didn't fit their plan. The 2014 season, the Eagles again went 10-6. Heck, they even started out 9-3, but Nick Foles broke his collarbone, and Mark Sanchez took over, and the Eagles missed the playoffs. But the 2015 season, Chip Kelly ran the ship, and he made the moves, and the Eagles were about to completely overhaul the roster. Chip got rid of Nick Foles, Evan Mathis, Trent Cole, LaShawn McCoy, and Jeremy Maclin, and brought in Sam Bradford, Byron Maxwell, Kiko Alonso, and DeMarco Murray. He thought these guys fit his system better, and that's how he was going to run the Eagles. Now, this really upset fans. They didn't like the moves Coach Kelly made and how he completely changed the roster. And entering the 2015 season, he was on the hot seat. The Eagles went 6-9 when Chip was fired before the last game of the season, and Pat Shurmur took over for that last game. The Eagles won that last game of the year to finish 7-9, but they had to do some soul searching. The Chip Kelly era just didn't work, so the Eagles brought back someone they were familiar with this time. The Eagles hired Chiefs offensive coordinator and former Eagle Doug Peterson to take over as head coach. He worked for Andy Reid in Kansas City, and Andy was a huge advocate for the Eagles hiring him. People thought this move was just so they could keep living in the past, back when times were good under Andy, and they hired one of Andy's guys to bring back those memories. Now, even though that's what people would assume, Doug Peterson brought in his identity and his style, not Andy's, and that changed the Eagles' culture in a great way. The Eagles wanted to clear the air and create a new culture, so Doug and GM Howie Roseman cleaned house. At the end of the 2015 season, the Eagles had the 13th pick in the NFL draft, and they traded Byron Maxwell and Kiko Alonso and their pick to the Miami Dolphins for the 8th pick. And later, they traded that 8th pick, their 3rd round pick, their 4th round pick, and a 2017 1st round pick, and a 2018 2nd round pick to the Cleveland Browns for the number 2 overall pick and a 2017 4th round pick. And finally, with that number 2 pick in the draft, the Eagles drafted a future star in the NFL in Carson Wentz. So now the Eagles had a QB who was young and ready to blossom into a star, and they started out the season 3-0 and were the most hyped team in the NFL. But they finished the season 7-9 and had some growing pains. Now, this was a great step in the right direction, and the 2017 season was going to go down as the best in franchise history. So let's talk about that. Eagles brought in Torrey Smith, Alshon Jeffrey, and LeGarrette Blount to help out on the offense, and they brought in Chris Long for the defense, and Nick Foles was going back to Philly to back up Carson Wentz. And with a solid defense led by Fletcher Cox and Malcolm Jenkins, the Eagles were ready to make some noise and get back in the playoffs. They started the year 1-1, losing in Kansas City versus Andy Reid and the Chiefs, but after that game, they won 9 straight games. Then they lost their second game in Seattle versus the Seahawks, and the week after that, they played the Rams in a battle for the top 2 teams in the NFL. But sadly, Carson Wentz tore his ACL and was going to miss the rest of the season that game. Now Nick Foles had to take over as the starter and lead the way. They won their next 2 games, but then they lost their last of the year because they rested their starters. The Eagles finished with a 13-3 record and were the number 1 seed in the NFC, but many people were writing them off. Without Carson Wentz, no one gave them a shot. The team even adopted the narrative of calling themselves underdogs and wore dog masks throughout the season. In the divisional round, they played the Falcons and won 15-10. And in the conference championship, they played the Vikings, who really wanted to win so they could play the Super Bowl on their home turf, but the Eagles put on a show, winning 38-7, marking their Super Bowl matchup with the Patriots. Now the Eagles had to face Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Some say they are the best coach and quarterback in NFL history, but the Eagles didn't let that distract them, and they went into this game just like they wanted to, as the underdog. The Eagles came out on fire. Their offense was rolling and Nick Foles looked like a Hall of Fame quarterback. But with 38 seconds left and in the red zone, Doug Peterson let Nick Foles run the Philly special, and if it didn't score, the Eagles could have lost all of their momentum. And it worked out, and the Eagles went into the halftime up 22-12. Now this was Tom Brady they were facing. He wasn't going to go down without a fight, so he got the Patriots winning the game 33-32. But with 2 minutes and 22 seconds left in the 4th quarter, Nick Foles threw a touchdown to Zach Ertz to put the Eagles up 38-33. Now this was plenty of time for Tom Brady to come back, but the Eagles forced a turnover and kicked a field goal to go up 41-33. The Patriots got the ball back and needed a miracle. And on the last play, Tom Brady threw a Hail Mary that fell short, and the Eagles won their first ever Super Bowl. The Eagles 2 years ago were in complete flux. They had a coach who drove them into the ground, and they weren't looking like a Super Bowl contender 2 years ago. But when you change the culture, bring in leaders, and build your homegrown talent up, anything is possible. That's why the Eagles have been such an interesting story and one that should never be forgotten. Now this season they have the finger pointed at them. They are no longer the underdogs. They are who everyone is circling on their schedules. It will be interesting to see how great Carson Wentz can be for them and if the pressure will affect this team. So thanks for watching everyone, and let's get this NFL season started tonight. Football is back, baby.